only way to make sure that that water is managed for the population, now we're talking about 25 million people, we're talking about all the businesses and farms, we're talking about the Republic of Mexico. The only way you can make that system work is to have dams. Because if you don't catch the water coming from the snow when it melts, you don't have the water available to use in the dry times or any time of the year other than in our state from May to late June, April to late June when the water comes up. So we have 2,000 reservoirs in Colorado.
Without the dams, we could not farm because there would be dry years and wet years. The first principal dam that was put in was at Lake Mead. They're essential. Without the dams, we would have a water supply of too much or too little. But you can have too many dams on the same river. And originally they planned 3 large dams on the Colorado River. They managed to build 2, but the 2 is more than we need now. There's only enough water to fill up 1 dam at this present time.
One of the things the dams do is they also change the temperatures of the water immediately downstream of the dam. And in the case of the Colorado River, we had a whole series of fish that were adapted to quite warm temperatures because of the warmth in the American Southwest and the Colorado River Basin that are no longer particularly suitable for what they now face below these dams. I mean, we have trout fisheries, for example, below Glen Canyon Dam and in the Grand Canyon, water that's 50 degrees cold or less, and that water naturally was much, much warmer than that. And so the native fish that used to live there and still try and live there are living in an environment that they're not particularly well adapted to.
Some of the native fish species in the river needed that fluctuation in temperature. When they built the Glen Canyon Dam, it changed the nature of the river. The water now is released out of Glen Canyon Dam at a constant 48 degrees Fahrenheit, which is very cold. The native fish species can no longer survive in that cold water. Exotic fish species like trout are now dominant in some parts of the river.
There are 4 native fish in the Colorado that are now listed as endangered, and the 3 of them were listed for a number of years, the 4th probably only in the last 10 years, and they are the warm water fish of the Colorado pike minnow, the razorback sucker, the bony tail, and the humpback chub. These fish occupied most of the habitat in very large numbers. They were very abundant throughout the river system. The lower portion of the river, Glen Canyon Dam and downstream, has virtually none of these native fish. One small population of humpback in Grand Canyon, some old razorbacks in Lake Mojave, which is the reservoir behind one of the dams in the lower basin, and a few species elsewhere. And the razorbacks are old. All of these fish are long-lived fish. They live 20, 30, 40 years. So the chance of recovering them is reasonable. I mean, they don't live a year or 2 and then they're gone. But the upper basin is the only place they're truly likely to be recovered. I mean, for better or worse, we have one of the longest undeveloped reaches of river in the United States in the Colorado Green Yampa system in the upper basin. So if we're going to restore them, this is where it's going to be.
Each species is a unique part of an ecosystem. It has a role that it plays. It's either an animal that may feed on something that we need to control, or it may be food for another species. For example, early in our history, we had destroyed a lot of our predators, a lot of the larger predators, grizzly bears, wolves, and the like. And what we found out was that those animals were very important in keeping the population of deer and elk and moose at levels that would keep them from destroying their own habitat. That if their numbers got too high, they ate all the grass or all the vegetation in an area, and the whole ecosystem would collapse, including that which humans need to survive, because we need to have good plant base, good animal base, and if we destroy one part of the ecosystem, we don't have enough knowledge to know what the impact will be at another part.
Are there going to be any more large dams built? Probably not. The Colorado River, in a lot of people's mind, has been overbuilt. We have a lot of dams. Now, in this environmental conscious age, these large mainstream dams aren't really getting built anymore. There are smaller, off-stream dams being built and maybe recharging water into the aquifers so that you don't have big surface exposure for evaporation. But that's still experimental. So smaller, off-mainstream dams are still going to be needed. You have to capture the water when it's available. If you don't, you can't serve your population and your businesses. The issues now are not enough water in times of drought. We want it for fish, we want it for recreation, but we also have a huge growing population. The western United States is the most rapidly growing population in the entire United States, and it has some of the shortest water supply.
I really believe that it's a mixed blessing today, and 100 years ago I believe the indigenous people would have been very much against it for a couple of reasons. Number one, you're disrupting something that's natural. The Colorado River has been there for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years, and it has always been allowed to run free, and the ecology of the area has grown around that. In the springtime, there were floods that brought good soil and fertile soil to the areas where they would farm, and in the wintertime, you would have a steady source of water. Actually, year-round, you'd have a steady source of water. But as more people began to settle in the West, the key to survival out here was water. Nobody could survive out here without water. And as this part of the country began to grow, they needed water. And being here in the desert, there's not a lot of water. So the only way that they could access water for drinking, for farming, for electricity was to build dams and ultimately store it and then use it for later use. But it has had a profound impact on the Colorado River ecosystem in a variety of different ways. From a cultural perspective, it goes back to that hurting your mother. And I don't think that the indigenous people really fully recognize what has been done in the name of progress. I think that they would have rather have left it alone, and that it has been a significant hurt to their culture.